Hello, everyone. This is African Esquire. So if you were tuning in previously, we were supposed to have a guest. Unfortunately, our sister Farida was having difficulties connecting. So we still want to have a live stream. We still did want to talk about some topics, especially the topics of Togo. That was really the topic that we wanted to talk about Farida with. If you have not seen, she's a very active activist, a Togolese activist, and probably the most well-known activist in regard to the Togo struggle. So hopefully we can schedule an interview at a future time. But for now, it didn't look like it was going to be able to happen today. But we're going to improvise. We have other topics that we want to talk about. Before I get into any topics, let me rewind. This is the Federation of African Liberation. We are a Pan-Africanist organization who focuses on connecting Africans throughout the diaspora for the purpose of mutual liberation. We have a new member, a new leader inside of our organization. I just want to introduce you guys, and if you could just give a quick introduction of yourself. This is our new PR chair, Kofi Newton. If Kofi, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, how you guys doing? My name is Kofi Newton. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I want to move to the continent. I want to move to the African continent, and I want to connect with others who would like to do the same. And I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be witnessing this, and I'm glad to be along for the journey. That's about it.
So Kofi, I'm sure once we get into different topics, he'll be able to, you'll hear a lot more of his views, but he's definitely a very brilliant person. He's been helping us out a whole lot. So let's get into some topics. Before we get into talking about some other things going on, we do want to still talk about Togo. There's a lot of new developments happening over there. And although Farida is not available to talk about them, we have Dwayne Omawale, our Minister of Information, who is very much entrenched inside of the struggle in Togo and is very well connected with Farida. So Dwayne, what new developments are happening as of right now inside of Togo?
Yeah, so what's going on right now is elections are come up in Togo on December 20th, and the Togolese people are protesting against it because, as is usually the case in Togo, there's a lot of irregularities leading up to the election. People are concerned about election fraud, and the other issue, as well as the dictator who's been in power since 2005, he's trying to run again for which would put him in power for another 10 years. And the people of Togo have reached a point where they're completely fed up. The dictatorship in Togo is the oldest military dictatorship on the African continent. So what the people of Togo have been protesting for the last year is an end to the dictatorship. They want for to step down and leave power. They definitely don't want another 10 years of a dictatorship. So the situation that's been happening there is because the people of Togo have been protesting against these upcoming elections, the government of Togo does what it usually does, which is to send out the military to brutalize people. Several people have been killed, many more have been injured, and among the people that were killed was an 11-year-old boy, and there's actually a video out there, and I've seen a video of the military. They just drove up and opened fire, shooting this child. He wasn't even involved in the protest. He was a mechanic who just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and he was killed for that. So that's the level of brutality that's been going on in Togo, and where my involvement is concerned is as a Pan-Africanist trying to organize here in the diaspora, the point I want to make to us here in the diaspora is that the struggle of the Togolese people is connected to the struggle we're facing here, because you have to understand that the reason why this government in Togo has been in power so long is they have the complete support of the United States, the complete support of France, and actually brought some statistics for this discussion. Last year, the United States government gave $13 million of aid to Togo, which includes military training and education. And as I said, the military in Togo is primarily used to oppress and kill Togolese people. And earlier this year, the Millennium Challenge Corporation gave $35 million to the government of Togo. So the point I always make when I discuss Togo and how it's connected to our struggle here, and I have another example I want to use, is I live here, I live in Central Florida, nearby Orlando, and Huffington Post ran a story recently about Orlando, a housing project in Orlando called Griffin Park. And the air pollution there is so bad that many of the people that live in the housing project have a lot of respiratory problems. So the thing to keep in mind is that we live in a country where the government is giving millions of dollars to a dictatorship in Togo to brutalize the Togolese people. In the meantime, African people living here are completely neglected. We don't see millions of dollars being pumped into our communities to address, the neglect and the needs that we have. So what I want people to understand about Togo and how that's relevant to us is that we shouldn't sit back and allow the United States government to continue to finance the government that's oppressing the people of Togo. In the meantime, we're completely neglected here. Like I said, last year they gave $30 million to the government of Togo. Can you imagine what $30 million to do to just any ghetto anywhere in this country? So that's how I look at that connection. I don't know if you want me to get into ECOWAS and that how they're involved in the situation as well.
Yeah, it's another story of, like Tupac said, United States has money for wars but can't feed the poor. We hear so many excuses as to why people in America are struggling, as to why the United States couldn't help people in Puerto Rico, why they couldn't help people in Haiti, like really help them, and not this fake pretend help. We hear so many stories, and the question always is, if you're so strapped for cash, if you can't pay reparations to the people who actually built this country, if you can't provide for the people who actually have been struggling the worst in this country, how can you possibly be funding these dictatorships? I mean, when you look at Africa, I think it was Frank. You posted like a meme, or so, it was I think it was one of you guys. Or for Day, I think. He posted a meme saying, we're over here, here's Africa. How is it possible that you can argue that you're fighting for our freedom all the way over here? And so that's always the question. Why is it that the United States government, which tells everyone that it's a government for the free, for the people who want to do right, who want to have human rights, how is it that this government manages to support regimes that are doing oppressive things to the people? And there's a list of human rights infractions. As Dwayne mentioned, it was an 11-year-old boy, I believe, who was killed by the Togo police or military. You have hospitals that are debilitated. You have prisons that are filled with people to where you're literally standing neck and neck with someone. The conditions are horrible, and the people living there have been suffering. So it's always concerning. How do we, as a country, how does this country really justify supporting these regimes while also saying that they're trying to get dictators out of power, such as, Saddam Hussein or whatever, yet they're going to support other dictators. So we know it's hypocrisy, and that's why we need more people to call out the hypocrisy, especially because we all live in different places in the U.S. We all have different, political representatives who we need to actually be bringing their attention to. Why is it that the U.S. is using their money over in Africa to support these dictatorships? Why is it that the U.S. has said that they're going to stand for justice, that they're going to stand for people to have the right to live, they're going to stand for human rights, and yet at the same time they're supporting this, that, and a third regime? How can the U.S. really condemn other countries like Saudi Arabia? How can they condemn Russia? How can they condemn North Korea and at the same time support regimes like the regime in Togo? So these are things that we as a people all can actually bring to the attention to, not just in Togo, but every single African dictatorship or African government that we know is doing the people wrong. How is it that our money, our taxpayer dollars, the money that we work for, is being used to fund these types of regimes? So anyone else want to comment on that?
I just think, we've been had for a long time. And since we're in this new information era, a lot of information is coming out to the point that they're being exposed. Now another thing that's going on is that they're being exposed so much that they almost don't care what they do out in the open. It's like we're going back to the times of monarchs, where you had these kings, and you were supposed to respect just like certain rules and certain natural laws of not going against. You could call these guys bullies. That's what I feel. A bully is gonna just slap you, and all the other students are gonna say, you know what, you should know better not to mess with that bully. And I feel that's what people are starting to conform to now. I almost think that, we have these huge giant corporations, and they're flooding money into this like one family, this one regime, and they want them to like wreak havoc on the rest of the population so that they don't ever progress, so they could just stay in power and there's no revolts, and they could just keep on taking resources out of the country. That's being purposely designed. I think the only way to combat that is for everyone to come together, to put all their crowdfund all their money, all their resources, and kind of try to come up with some technology that the government can't control. They could barely control. No one person could control the internet. So I believe that's the first solution. Now, if I don't know, if there could just be some way, if people could just have, I don't know, it's like almost entering like the sci-fi realm. But if people could, you know, and like I'm against like violent, you know, I'm against violence. I think civil wars are old, and I think that's what they want to happen. They want two sides to fight so the country could stay destabilized. I just think you have to kind of like beat out the government. You have to beat them out in getting food. You have to beat them out in, you know, just controlling yourself. Their only control mechanism is through money, and that money is coming from a foreign land. And I feel like if you take that from them, if you create your own money, create your own form of currency, like let's say cryptocurrency, then you're just taking power. You're taking power away from them. They're already not putting the majority of the citizens to work. So I believe it's really up to the citizens of these Black nations to kind of create their own. There's a lot of technology out there that could help these people. Could be avoid violence. I almost think it's and I almost think it's inevitable. I always try to picture myself living amongst these people in these countries, and I try to put myself in these shoes and say, you know, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I would go somewhere where they don't operate at, and that's probably in the bush. And that's all I have to say for now.
Frank, I have a question. You know, we lived on a continent, obviously. So do you see that there's a difference in the way that people are viewing how like this era, or that it's actually about to change? Because we talk about these issues a lot. We talk about things inside of different countries, and it can kind of be dismal, but a lot of people I notice are waking up from online, getting access to videos and getting access to different sources of information. So do you see a change in the tide as far as, do you think very soon we could actually see an end to these types of regimes, like the regime in Togo, and we're going to talk about Congo in a little bit. Do you see a change?
Yeah, can I come in?
Go ahead.
Hello? Yeah, okay. Yes. I see.
Well, one second. Do you want to turn your camera?
Oh, this way?
Yeah. Okay, there you go.
All right. Okay. So we good? All right. Yeah, I see change coming, but the change can only come for if we Black people in the diaspora and Black people on the continent find that mutual understanding, that mutual movement that can happen. Like Kofi said, we now live in a time period where we have technology to expose these people. That remind me like during the 50s, during the civil rights movement here. I watched a video about one old folks, they asking like during the civil rights movement, did he see anything, like Dr. King's and like other movement, like great movement going on? And he said no. And they asking why. He said because at that time there was nothing like internet, there was nothing like technology, that was giving like that they could easily find information. So with our generation, even though we don't have that last CNN to support our movement, we don't have that like NBC or that ABC to broadcast, our movement, but we can use the media in such a way that, for example, what we're doing now to pass the message on to expose these imperialists, to expose these colonial settlers, to expose neo-colonialism on a continent and even not on a continent. Even in America here, neocolonialism is still going on here in America. So when we talk about neocolonialism, we're not just talking about Africa. It still go on here in the fight that for each time African people in America here try to come out to speak about the injustices against them, and then the system in turn, call them names and put them in the box and don't recognize their grievances or don't recognize their problem, and then they come out to say all kind of negative thing about them, and then pretend and then all these negative things, and then take it to the wall, and then pretend that this is how African in the diaspora look like. So it's all part of neocolonialism just being practiced in different ways. Now, this is what I'm going to say. America can never survive without what she's doing. For example, if America is a nation that really want to practice true democracy, I will tell you she will crash down in a second. And second, if America is a nation that want to practice true religion, true Christianity, she will crack down in a second. America can never practice Christianity, true Christianity. America can never practice true democracy. Because if she do that, she will get nowhere to get those resources through negotiation, because she's not a nation that do negotiation peacefully. So what they're doing is in their favor. That's the only way they can be able to get resources and ill resources into his or her into their country, like the United States of France, the UK, and all of those people. They don't practice true democracy. If they try it, they will fail, because true democracy go in the hands of the people. So if the true democracy go into the hands of the people have to make decision. So if they go there to make negotiation, all these agreements or whatsoever will pass through the people. So they find it means, well, they can put somebody in power who is so greedy, power greedy and greed, and then sponsor them with billions of dollars or money, and then try to get what they can get. And then the next thing about it is the so-called African soldiers. They are so stupid. How can you take one person, one man over an entire country, to the extent that even the protests these people doing, it also go to protect even your children, because those soldiers, those Togolese soldiers in Togo, trust me, if you go in your home, they're not even living the best of life. Their kids don't even eat 2 meals a day. Their children eat 1 meal a day, and not even quite a meal. And then yet people get on the street to protest for the future of your children. And you sit down there and then get on the street to shoot these people down, to kill these people for the sake of America and one individual. It sounds crazy. But what we need to do here is freedom never comes through moral discipline. We have come so far, and for where we have come did not come easy. It did not come by African people peacefully, being peaceful to the colonial settlers or to imperialism. No, it came by we struggling. People died in it. People went to jail. People starved. People were beaten, people, door attacked them, people were shot, and all of these things. And that's how we have come this far. And we can't stop. Like today, I was in a meeting with the All African People Revolutionary Party, and we discussed something that when you're fighting for peace, the aggressiveness the imperial use on you or the oppressor use on you, you have to come out with that same aggressiveness and use it on them. And then let them know how painful it is. And then they will be able to try to understand you. If not, they will never understand. So my solution here is we African have to come together and fight this fight, because these people will never understand as long as they benefit from it. They will never understand us. For example, we see what happened in South Africa. You see it? So, I mean, they're seeing it. They know that it is the right thing, or the South African are calling for. But on the other hand, they know that, there are fewer, white people in South Africa. So if they distribute the land equally, it simply means, in reality, white people will have no access to big land or to big farm or to the mining industry, to the gold, to the diamond. It will now go in the hands of the African. So that's why they are holding on to it. You see, so why will you hold on to a land that you took from the people forcefully? You kill people into it at the time. And now they're trying to demand for it, and they're not even killing you. They're telling you you're not divided equally, and so we can move on. And you there on the other hand saying, no, it's not fair. So that's good to say, when it comes to these imperialists, we cannot go to them with moral discussion. We have to go to them and take it by force. The same way they came on us, that's the same way we have to go on them. In the process, we'll lose life. And that's how history has been going. We have where we have come, people lost life. So in order to move on with the future for the next generation to come and find a peaceful place, people got to got to lose life. Life have to go on. Life, people got to die, people got to fall, and people got to be buried. You see, so we have to just take that initiative, because no matter what happens, America will not come to our aid, or France will not come to our aid, because if they come, why are they coming for? At the end of the day, the resources they're getting, they will no longer get it. And that is why America, #1 support is always militaries. You see, America only support you when you engage into militarism. They will support you with any amount to go and kill your own people, and then they sit down silent.
Yeah, I want to add to that. Like, I think Malcolm might have let out this sentiment that really, when it comes to nonviolence and the idea of, whether or not we will have to lose lives, really, it's up to the white people in power. Because I really do think that if they were to peacefully allow these countries to go, meaning peacefully no longer try to control their economies, control their militaries, control their governments, and peacefully withdraw, I really think that almost all African people, they would be happy enough to take care of themselves instead of, try to go out and seek revenge. It's really up to the power structure. It's not up to us how things happen or how things transpire. So I just wanted to add that point. And then I seen 2 comments I wanted us to get into. One, it's Algie. I think this was in regard to, I was saying that, we should all bring to light to our political leaders in our different localities the U.S. hypocrisy as far as funding different regimes. He said the U.S. government is going to do what they want still, even if you start questioning them. And that's very true. I'll say, and I think that all of FAL, we agree on this point. Confronting political leaders, that's not necessarily going to make the United States stop doing what it's going to do, because as Frank pointed out, the United States is doing what it needs to do to survive. If they were not carrying out these neo-colonialistic policies, if they were not controlling the resources in different parts of the world, this country, the way that you see it, the way it functions, the types of buildings that you see, the technology that you see in this country, it would not exist. So it's not about bring it to light more so because you actually think they're going to stop doing what they're doing. it's more of a strategy about awakening the people throughout the diaspora, or even people who might just care about the things that are going on, to the hypocrisy of this country. And, you know, the key to the hypocrisy, I mean, the best example is, you know, Gaddafi. He was painted as this horrible dictator, and all the while the United States was giving their money to actual dictators who were actually horrible, who the people who actually did not represent their people. And it's really a cause for revolution. Once the people are awakened, once the sleeping giant is awakened to the fact that our country is in the mode of hypocrisy and is actually funding these people, it's a strategy. So similarly, we try to raise awareness through human rights, not because we necessarily think the UN is going to go to the United States and say, you must stop colonizing Africa, or colonizing Haiti, colonizing Jamaica. We don't think that that's realistically going to happen, because the UN has a precedent that it has set of not actually going out and doing things. However, whenever you get the masses of African people around the world to be awakened to the fact that these institutions that say that they are going to represent us actually do not represent us, and not only do they not represent us going to their meetings, us treating these institutions like they are a legitimate institution, that actually robs us of our own dignity, because we know that whenever it comes to our struggle, whenever it comes to the UN actually responding to Black people dying, Africans dying, we know that they're not going to do anything. So why would we go and even give our presence to the Human Rights Council when we know that the Human Rights Council has been hypocritical in actually applying its laws to African people? So it's a strategy that we awaken people using the laws of the United States, using the principles of the United States. The United States thinks it's this very humane place. Okay, let's talk about these principles. Let's talk about what real freedom actually means. Let's talk about what real justice actually means. Since you want to be the land of the free, let's talk about what it actually is. And when you actually call them on these things, you can actually awaken, as I said, the sleeping giant. As we know, a lot of our African brothers and sisters do believe in the American dream. They do buy into the concept that has been taught to us. They believe that when the United States goes into Libya, that they're actually there to liberate Libya, and that they're not there to actually benefit themselves. So let's understand these things and actually try to find ways to bring attention to what's going on inside of the world. So I'm going to go to the other question. One second. And this is a question I think any of us can answer. One second. Okay, so I wanted to go to this because this is actually something we wanted to talk about with Farida. But Righteous One is asking, is the African Union a governing body that can bring some sort of development progress in Togo? So I know this is something that Dwayne, I think you were going to bring up to Farida. I don't know if you want to comment on it or.
Yeah, I mean, I'd comment on it because the last thing that I mentioned when I ended was ECOWAS, because one of the issues that Farida and a lot of Togolese activists have right now is the ineffectiveness of ECOWAS, of the African Union, and of other institutions in addressing the situation in Togo. But before I get to that, y'all raised a couple of points that I wanted to mention. One of which was, Gaddafi. You mentioned Gaddafi, and a lot of people didn't see this, but recently the Prime Minister of England actually apologized, because what came out was that the UK was actually assisting Gaddafi with capturing and torturing people in Libya. So the intervention in Libya was framed as, Gaddafi being this horrible, dictator abusing human rights, and we find out a lot of Western countries were actually helping Gaddafi with violating those human rights, and that's the case in Togo and many other African countries, that these same forces are, and even Saddam Hussein was the same thing. Saddam Hussein was an American ally before he became this, evil dictator that America had to go in there and overthrow. And the other point that I want to mention was in terms of change. What we see going on in Togo is actually a trend that's been going on throughout the African continent for years. Burkina Faso, the Gambia, and Ethiopia are three countries recently that actually were able to topple the dictators that were there and doing the kind of things that the people of Togo are doing. And this is where the African Union or other institutions, become important, because Burkina Faso, the Gambia, Ethiopia, those are countries where people where people rose up in rebellion and were able to successfully create a change in government. Now in Togo, the government has responded to these protests through horrendous, extreme, brutal violence being unleashed on the Togolese people. And so far, there's no serious response from ECOWAS, no serious response from the African Union, or any other African countries or institutions. So what's going on right now in Togo is the people of Togo are essentially completely isolated in their struggle. They don't have a lot of allies on the African continent in terms of African governments and institutions. And another point I want to mention is even us as Pan-Africanists, we've failed Togo. And I don't mention this to boast and to make the Federation of African Liberation look like such a great Pan-Africanist organization, but has anyone else seen any other organization in diaspora but us really speaking consistently about what's going on in Togo? So this is a struggle that's been going on for a year, and what I'm noticing is a lot of Pan-Africanists in the diaspora don't really seem to be speaking on what's going on in Togo. They're not interested in what's going on in Togo. And it's not just Togo. I mean, one of the things that we're going to talk about as well is the Congo. I don't see anyone in the diaspora speaking about what's going on in the Congo. So I think when we're talking about Pan-Africanism, we have to become more effective as Pan-Africanists both on the continent and the diaspora at responding to these issues, staying informed in these issues and being proactive. South Africa, one of the reasons why apartheid ended when it did is because we in the diaspora were putting constant pressure on the United States, on Britain, on these foreign powers that were backing the apartheid regime. And even Portuguese colonialism in Africa, it wasn't just a struggle of the people, the African people in those colonies that ended Portuguese colonialism. You also had, us in the diaspora here that assisted the struggles. Cuba actually sent to African countries like Angola to assist with the struggles there. So I think, as Pan-Africanists, we have to do a better job at supporting these liberation struggles and becoming more actively engaged than we are. And again, this goes back to the African Union being completely ineffective as a Pan-African institution in that regard. You don't see the African Union stepping in to try to resolve these issues. And the last thing I'll say is one of the issues with how neighboring African countries and with how the African Union has been dealing with the situation in Togo is they've been treating Faure as if he's the democratically elected president of Togo. Togo's never had fair and free elections. I mean, the last time Togo really had elections was independence when they elected the first president, and he was subsequently assassinated. And since then, Togo's never had fair and free elections. But yet, the African Union, other African countries, and obviously, the Western countries that support Togo all treat Togo as if the president there has been democratically elected by the people rather than he's actually a president who seized power through military coup.
And I'll add to that I honestly believe that the African Union has to go personally, because it's kind of like I was saying earlier. When you look at the United Nations has been tasked with doing a number of things, with actually holding nations accountable, but they won't do it, especially if you're an African nation. So when you look at the African Union is really made up of puppet governments, puppet leaders. I mean, almost every single leader, if they're not even if they were actually put in power by the people, they're not being paid and sponsored by the people. They're being paid and sponsored by outsiders. So for us to expect the African Union to step in with a situation like Togo and actually do something, we're not having realistic expectations, because we're expecting people to call out regimes for the very same thing that they're doing. So, but I do think that we have to, like I said, we have to use the laws against them. The African Union is tasked with a number of things. It's tasked with actually calling out other African nations that do not adhere to their bylaws. So that is our responsibility, to actually follow their procedures and actually bring to light the fact that they don't follow them, they don't correct other countries, they're really just a figurehead. So I do believe at some point, as people evolve, as new leaders rise up, as revolutions rise up, that people will honestly either radically change the African Union or understand that we have to have a completely different, separate body actually that unites the continent. And, if you look at the history of the African Union, you really do see different phases. It's not the same. Originally, it was the Organization of African Unity, I believe, and it became the African Union. It's not even when it just changed their name, they were not the same organization that they were in the days of Nkrumah. They were not the same organization they were in the days of Haile Selassie. This is a whole nother African Union. They don't necessarily adhere to Pan-Africanism. So as a body, that's a body that we have to actively criticize. And ultimately, again, awaken a sleeping giant to say that we're not going to legitimize you, African Union, if you're not going to actually do what you said that you're going to do. So any other comments on the African Union before we move on?
Yeah, let me comment on that. Let me see. Okay, you can hear me? All right. So, you know, I always says this. Africa is the only continent where the leaders, a leader will says to the younger generation, you guys are the future leader, but never ever invest in the future leader. Africa is the only continent where the older people will say, you guys are the are the future leader, but never leave power. They want to stay in power till their grave, till they dig their grave in their horses. They never train the younger generation to come out to be the future leader. In fact, the younger generation can even die before the older one, because why? They never trained them, and the younger generation even die because of starvation, and they can't even get to where they want to get. Now, the AU, the OAU in 1963 is different from the AU today, because the same people, the same leader, the same African leaders who go into those meetings, the AU meeting, it is the same face or faces that serve their colonial master. So why will anything productive come from in those meetings, or in those meetings that they usually have and things? The only thing I see from AU when they come from meetings, they are like bunch of kids coming from on a party. The only thing I see pictures. They take bunch of pictures, and then those leaders that have Facebook, they put on Facebook, on social media, and then without discussing nothing, and come out empty-headed. And then saying, oh, we have the AU meeting and this. You don't even see no video of them discussing about Africa, about the next generation, about the next leader, about the next scientists of African, the next doctors of African, the next lawyers of Africans. Nothing. But all you will see is, you know, part of pictures with their counterpart and whatsoever, and then put it on Facebook. So the AU these days is different from the AU in 1963, because they are not even getting funding from Africa. They are getting funding from the so-called European nations. So the hands that feed you, you know, it's like the law of economy says, you never play with your source of income. So the AU never play with their source of income, because they're getting their income from the so-called developed world, like the United States, France, and UK, and Germany, and the rest of the people. So that's the reason anytime they're having a meeting, you always see an EU representative in an AU meeting. Where will you see an AU representative in EU meeting, or even in NATO? Because these people pay their money. So at the end of the day, if we're having a meeting, we have to have a representative there. That's what they tell you. That's what they tell these people. And when they're having a representative there, trust me, you're not going to say anything that will not go in a favor of these people, because they are there looking at you like, you don't say anything crazy, because we're going to come against you, and we're going to stop our funding. And these so-called greedy African leaders who don't even know their value, who don't even know what they have in Africa, and then sit down there because they want a physical cash, and then hold their cash and sell their country, sell the continent, sell their own people. So for once, it is true. The whole entire AU need to be dissolved. We don't need it, because it exists and we see it, we talk about it, but they do nothing in our life effective. In fact, they harm us, because at the end of the day, the same so-called European leaders will turn around and then mock our organizations that we turn, you know, to seek protection from. They mock us, saying we don't know how to lead, you know, we don't know how to fund organization. We claim we got organization, we claim we got entity to protect us, but these entities don't protect us. So I don't blame, you know, these Europeans when they come out saying negative thing about African leaders, saying negative thing about African organizations. You know, it is because Those who serve the political will don't know what politics is, don't know what it means to serve, don't know what it means to be a leader, don't know what it means to lead a nation, to lead a continent, don't know what it means to invest in your people to create the next generation. In Europe here, what the thing about is when I leave, I want for my next generation to come out and be the next greater generation that will rule the world. But our African leaders not even thinking that way. All they think here is to get Western money and put in Western banks. Now Putin said, at the end of the day, you die, you go be buried in a deadest slum continent, and then the money leave right overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I really feel like, you know, I really believe if we're really going to have true revolution at some point, the African Union has to go, because it's like, it's almost like any institution in the United States. You know, whenever the prison system is doing what it's operated to do we really expect that the prison system is going to stop incarcerating Africans at disproportionate numbers? No, that's what it was created and designed to do. So I think that's a very important point that, you know, when you look at the setup of the African Union, you have a bunch of people who are getting their money and their, let me turn this off, getting their money and things from outside governments. And they're doing what they should be doing. That is trying to protect their pockets, trying to secure the bag for themselves. And that's what the institution is built as being. So absolutely. I mean, I don't see any way that it would have to change, that it would change from the African Union that we have today. It would have to be a total different setup, a total different understanding from the leaders that we're actually serving the people, that we're actually adhering to the principles, we're not adhering to directions from outside governments. So should we pivot into Congo? We talked about Togo for an hour, so I feel like we definitely got some good talk about that. So Dwayne has an update for us about what's going on in the Congo.
Yeah, Congo's situation is actually very similar to what's going on in Togo. The current president there, Joseph Kabila, has been the president since 2001. And just like Togo, he actually took over from his father, who is also a dictator in the Congo. So what's happening right now in the Congo is they have elections coming up. Now, these elections actually were supposed to happen 2 years ago, but Kabila just decided to delay the election for 2 years, and the United States, you know, allowed him to do it. But the concern people are having now, those elections are coming up, and Kabila is, he's not running again, but people fear that he's going to subvert the democratic process in the Congo to try to put in a puppet so that he could still be indirectly in control of the Congo, but he'll have a puppet in power. And recently, one of the things that happened in the Congo is 80% of the voting machines were mysteriously destroyed in a fire, and a lot of people are thinking it's a conspiracy on the part of the government there to once again, you know, delay the elections, the typical election delay tactics. And one of the reasons why we as Pan-Africanists should be especially concerned with the Congo is, you know, one of the poorest. I've seen some reports saying it's the poorest country in the world, but materially it's the wealthiest country in the world. And that's exactly why the Congo has been so impoverished, because for decades now, Western governments have been exploiting the resources of the Congo. I'm sure most people who are familiar with anything regarding African history would have heard the story of Patrice Lumumba, and you know, how United States, Belgium, and, you know, other powers collaborate to eliminate him and get him out of power. So what's been going on in the Congo for the last 50 years, the Congo has been completely exploited, not only by Western powers, but even African countries themselves, like Rwanda. Paul Kagame's done a lot of very exploitative things to the Congo as well. Uganda has also played a role in that. So right now, the Congo is a country that's essentially being exploited by every outside force. And again, just like Togo, the people in the Congo have been fighting against the dictatorship there. There have been protests, but they're very isolated in terms of there's very little support for the Congolese people, both on the continent and internationally, including among Pan-Africanists. And the last thing I'll add in terms of, again, bringing back the similarities between what's happening in Congo and Togo is one of the things that, you know, people that are paying attention to dictatorships on the African continent are noticing, and, you know, Kofi, you were mentioning this about technology and the internet. A lot of African dictators have been exploiting, have been trying to shut down the internet. You know, Togo, when the protests started, the dictatorship shut down the internet so people didn't have access to the internet. That's been done in the Congo. That's been done in Sierra Leone recently. So the next step that we're seeing in terms of oppressive tactics on the part of African leaders is taking control of the internet and restricting it so that protesters don't have freedom of internet.
Okay. As Dwayne stated, the Congo is always going to be a strategic location as far as what's going on there because of their position, their strategic position as being, it really is the most rich country in the whole world. And although it's the richest country in the whole world, we also know that it's the poorest. So we always have to understand, number one, it's not a coincidence that the richest country in the whole world has the poorest people living inside of it. Then when you look at what's actually being taken out of the Congo, we know that Apple is one that actually really benefits from these materials that are being taken. A lot of different tech companies benefit from the cobalt that is in Congo. So it's always going to be a target. So it's very interesting. There's going to be elections. My question is, Kabila's out, but do we actually, given the horrible history of how people have been treated in Congo, do we actually believe that they have done anything to prevent the continuation of being exploited, the continuation of having their resources raped? And we got to talk about this also. Like when we get these dictators out of power, what are we doing to prevent the next president, the next politician from doing the exact same thing? So, do anyone have thoughts on this? Is Congo actually going, now that they have gotten rid of Kabila, are they actually going to be in a better situation, or are they posed right now to possibly be in the same situation that they were in previously?
Can you hear me? Okay, so with the Congo situation and with the new, we even talk about it today in studies when we met for how they call it the All African People Revolutionary Party. We talk about Congo and the new leader, and then he even made a statement because the EU, not the AU, but the EU, the European Union, came out to say why they didn't have a representative from Europe into the meeting they had about Congo. And then the new emerging leader, he came out to say they don't need EU into the Congolese affair, because the affair of Congo need to be recognized by the Congolese and not European or not EU, because EU have nothing to do with their affair, because since in the 1960s, these people been fighting war. Where have EU been? But smuggling the resources from this little nation. Now they are trying, revolutionary are coming to come out now to try to bring a peace and stability to the nation. And then that's the time you want to bring yourself saying, that why you didn't have an EU representative. It just almost sounds like what Duane put he Duane makes on code, like the United States way to come and be the judge for its atrocity. Like you went somewhere, you caused trouble, and at the end of the day, you turn around and be the investigator, for the trouble you have caused. But however, right now we can't say we trust the new government or the new entity that is coming in, because at the end of the day, this is why most of these African leaders do, and we just saw it recently in Zimbabwe, where the new leader that came in, people thought it was going to be bread and butter, but at the end of the day, people start regretting, the citizens start regretting that, Robert Mugabe was even better than this individual because of what's happening now. But the only way to Congo can change, from west to better, is that the expected leader to come in should be a true revolutionary. Yeah, should be a true revolutionary who knows the meaning of revolutionary, who knows the struggle Congo have gone through since 1960. That's the only way that country will move on, but not leaders who have been brainwashed, who have had some Western education whatsoever. You have to be a true revolutionary, a true visionary, a true leader for the people. That's the only way Congo will come out of that situation. If not, no, I don't see it coming.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, we have to keep in mind they had a regime change, definitely. But, you know, I didn't hear about too many actual constitutional changes as far as the powers that the president does have. I didn't hear of any changes as far as the checks and balances, or, I mean, I know I'm using American terms, but I didn't hear any changes as far as the distribution of power in that country. So, you know, it does look like unless they get someone who has that heart of Patrice Lumumba, they're going to continue to deal with the same exploits, especially because we know that as soon as their new person is elected, that person, first of all, I believe that the West actually told Kabila to step down, which, you know, tells you right there that they have their eye on someone else, or they have their eye on doing something else.
Exactly. They have done their groundwork.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't, you know, tell people to step down unless they see something better happening in the alternative. So that right there is a red flag. So, you know, unfortunately, it doesn't look like, unless they do happen to have someone with that Patrice Lumumba heart, doesn't look like we're going to be in a different situation, even though we have gotten rid of a horrible dictator. So I had a question and from Prince Daddy. He says, African Esquire, how come the flame of the Arab Spring didn't touch sub-Saharan African countries? And I think that's an interesting question because I think all of us remember like around 2010 when all of these Arab countries were having revolutions and they were getting rid of their leaders. Egypt was one of them. Although Egypt, as we know, is in Africa, but it's considered Arab nowadays. You know, Libya, which is also in Africa. A lot of different countries, they had different regime changes. So why didn't those regime changes not affect sub-Saharan African countries? Those regimes basically survived all of the revolution. And, you know, my answer would just be that I think it's strategic. You know, we definitely know that Egypt and Libya, that was instigated by the West. And obviously, if the West already has the power, already has a position inside of other African countries, they're not going to instigate revolutions against their own power. So that's my thoughts. I don't know if anyone else has any other thoughts.
I mean, what I would say, that I mentioned this earlier, that's essentially actually what's going on in Africa right now. We have uprisings across the continent against dictatorships. We were talking about Congo and Togo, for examples. I mentioned the Gambia, Burkina Faso, and Ethiopia, where dictators were actually removed. And, you know, like I said, other parts of the continent, Cameroon is on the verge of a civil war because people are trying to get rid of dictatorship there. So what's going on across the African continent right now is essentially what Arab Spring was, in terms of Africans are rising up and trying to get rid of these oppressive regimes.
Yeah, I don't really agree with the whole like Arab Spring. I don't think a lot of the so-called Arab Spring, you know, when you say Libya, when you talk about Iraq, when you talk about Afghanistan, you know, these countries have been put through hell through the funding of, you know, pretty much organized terrorism coming from the West. I think the Arabs in the Middle East are falling in line. The Saudis are falling in line. You know, the United Emirates, Arab Emirates, they're all falling in line. That's where a lot of their wealth is coming from, and their wealth is coming strictly through cash. You know, liquidity. They're falling in line, and they're pretty much watching their people all get destroyed. I feel like they're just a bit quiet. They're just a bit quiet about it, or it's just dressed up to seem like there's some type of Islamic revolt, but it's not. It's obvious what happened to Gaddafi. You know, they were being funded by the West to get Gaddafi out. So I don't agree with that statement. I just think there's a monopoly on, owning these countries through central banking. And then through central banking, you would just funnel the resources through that. There's a monopoly on it, and it has been sealed. The only people who could really fight that are the people who's technological advance, and they could kind of cheat the system and beat the system, whether they're doing it for themselves or whether they're doing it in the name of revolt. I really think this is like the only way for people to become technologically advanced and to almost troll the current status quo. If anyone could learn how to build their own robots, artificial intelligence robots, if anyone knows how to, build their own drones, I would use that as a form of survival and to combat the current regimes that's being controlled by the financial global elite, because that's all that's happening. I don't think the people that's in power, I don't think they're as smart. All they know how to do is collect US dollar notes. All they know how to do is collect francs. There's going to be a new class of people that's going to emerge, and they're going to just control their own currency, and they're going to invent things to where, they could fucking escape. They could escape any brutal dictators and come back with a bigger army. It seems like something maybe like 10, 20 years from now, but that's what's on my mind. I feel like that's the only way.
That's a good point. I mean, I do think that, the whole term Arab Spring was definitely manipulated by Western news outlets. And as I said, it seems like a lot of those were actually instigated by the U.S. But I do think, as we kind of, I guess, leave the continent and close out with our last topic, I do think that people can keep in mind or look at what happened out of that. I mean, especially as Dwayne is saying, a lot of African new countries are now waking up to what's going on in their countries, and they're actually trying to have a regime change. When you look at Egypt, I mean, Egypt went from a monarchy, I believe, and they're still in chaos. You look at Libya, they had Gaddafi, who I forget what he called his government, but it was I forget, honestly, but he was the central figure, and now a lot of people are saying we wish we had Gaddafi back. Look at what happened in Zimbabwe. I mean, everyone, they want Mugabe out. They want Mugabe out. Get him out. We need to have, what everyone else has. We need to be like everyone else. And now a lot of people are saying it was better when he was there. So that's another cautionary tale. It's like why we have to think 10 steps ahead and not just think about the figures or the images of the people. The people will always, do what the conditions allow them to do. And the conditions on the continent, the environment is one that encourages leaders to do such things, to exploit their people, to benefit outside Western interest or Chinese interest. This is what the conditions are. So we have to be not just concerned about ousting leaders, but also ousting conditions that allow these leaders to be bought and to be sold out to the interest of the people. So I think I'll move on if no one else has anything to add.
I mean, the main thing I want to add is just the point I mentioned before about how this process is going on in the African continent, and people who are committed and serious about Pan-Africanism, our duty here in the diaspora, aside from fighting for the issues that directly impact us where we live, I think we should also become more informed about what's going on the African continent and become more actively engaged in trying to assist, with that process I mentioned before. South Africa, we were able to assist the people of South Africa here in the diaspora through raising awareness on the issue, and like I said, through putting pressure on these foreign governments, because we know that Western governments are always going to act in their own self-interest, but we also know from history that when we confront them from a position of power and when we put pressure on these governments, we do get a reaction from them. In some cases, we do get them to withdraw from policies. An example I could use recently, this is not necessarily Africa, but Saudi Arabia, the Senate passed a resolution to stop funding Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen. So we have seen examples where we can't put pressure on certain Western governments to get certain results. So I think we in the diaspora have to become more actively engaged in the political process in the sense of being realistic and understanding what the system is and what it isn't, but also understanding that things aren't going to change if we sit back and not engage in that process of forcing that change.
Okay, so we're going to talk about something a little lighter to close out, but so many of you probably heard this past, was it a week or 2 weeks now, the whole controversy with Kevin. I want to talk about it not because I'm really into the whole Hollywood thing, but I actually think there's a lot of good lessons that came out of the controversy. So just to recap, no, none of you heard, Kevin Hart was picked to host the Oscars 2019. Within not too long after he was chosen, a lot of people looked through his Twitter timeline or brought up the fact that he had some tweets where he was using gay slurs, and basically they were saying that he was homophobic based on his tweets. So Kevin Hart first came out and said, y'all are too much. I'm not, gonna apologize. Chill out. Then he gets a call from the Oscars, and he goes on social media and says, they're telling me I either have to apologize or I won't be the host, and I'm going to say I'm not going to host. But then he comes out later again and then apologizes. So what did y'all think? I know for me, like I've never been a fan of him, especially I know we had talked about Tiffany Haddish, and I was saying similarly with her. I don't like the humor of people who stay away from political topics, people who want to appease everyone. To me, you're useless as a comedian if you're not willing to talk about things that are controversial, and he's always been that way. Also, I remember different times, during the Black Lives Matter movement, and people, different celebrities would come out and they would speak plainly, we're against what happened to Trayvon, we're against what happened to Mike Brown. And Kevin Hart, he didn't even want to be literal when it came to addressing those issues. He would just say, everyone, we have to learn love, or say something like abstract, like we have to learn to love each other. And he didn't want to specifically call out those issues. And because of that, I'm only saying that to say that I'm not bringing this topic up to defend him, because to me, he has been very clear that he doesn't want to defend us whenever we're the ones who are actually and you look at what's going on, being killed in the streets, by police, and that's way more serious than actually losing a bid for the Oscars. So he has shown that he's not willing to talk about those things, yet he's willing to try to be someone that everyone can get along with, white, black, whatever, which is fine. But whenever it's now you, I'm not going to come out the back for you, because, you kind of showed what you feel about your people. So I just wanted to get that part out of the way. But so it's ironic to me. At the same time, I was very surprised that he did not apologize to the Oscars, because to me, I felt like he's always been someone who played that game as far as Hollywood. If you bark when I say bark game, I really thought that that's what he was. And I'll say that I'll give him credit that he at least was not willing to just apologize when people told him to apologize. So what were you guys' thoughts on everything that happened?
Can I say it? I think it's I don't know. It's very controversial. I felt that, him not doing the show was a good choice. And that I also think him not doing it revealed something else. It revealed what it just exposes Hollywood and their treatments of Black people. And I think that it's like they're playing into like a us versus you kind of thing. And this it seems to come up a lot when it's either a Black woman or a Black man, and then they just dig something up about us to kind of like either take us off that platform or make us uncomfortable. And I don't know, I I don't have any problems with the LGBT community. I think they're trying just to show awareness of like their struggle throughout the decades and throughout history in this country. They want to prevent, you know, like random acts of killings and violence against themselves, and this is their way of doing it. So being politically correct and, you know, policing what people say. On the other hand, I disagree with the way they did it. I think it was tasteless. I think instead of telling him to apologize, I think they should have came to him first and say like, hey, can you say something about your tweets, because people from the industry are asking about it, and it's coming up, and we would just like you to just add to it while you're doing your job on stage. I think they tried to assassinate his character in the media, and at the same time, when you assassinate someone from an individual from a group of people, it almost touches on like a whole community, or like the race that person is representing, you know. And I feel like the media plays into that, where not only are we going to take out Bill Cosby, or not only we're going to take out the Kevin Harts, we're going to take out the whole Black community, you know, by making us the face of LGBT hatred, you know, which I think is absurd. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Okay. Anyone else want to add anything? Frank or Dwayne?
What I'd add is we talked about Mark Lamont Hill. I think last discussion is a similar kind of thing to me, where I think certain Black people in the public eye feel like, you know, they'll be safe if they just stay apolitical, you know, not really get into racial issues, take very racially neutral positions. And this is just another example of the fact that no matter how hard you try to play it safe, at some point you're going to find yourself tangled up in the controversy. So my position is, if you find yourself in a controversy like this, at least, you know, make it something worthwhile, something beneficial to the Black community. Like, you know, again, a controversy like Colin Kaepernick, you know, do something that's beneficial for us. And that's why I don't feel the need to be very defensive of Kevin Hart, because, as you said, he doesn't, you know, defend us. He doesn't speak up for us. And I saw Sandra Bland, you know, recently there's, you know, people in the LGBT community that are trying to slander her, and to me, like, I'd feel more incentive to defend her, because she's someone that actually, you know, fought for us, in many martyr for our struggle. So those are the type of people that I would defend. You know, Kevin Hart, for me, he gets no sympathy.
Yeah, the Sandra Bland controversy was crazy. And if anyone didn't know, there's a Sandra Bland documentary coming on, I don't know what channel, but basically a lot of the LGBT community basically wanted to boycott the documentary because she has said anti-gay comments in the past. And, you know, I almost did a video about it, but I try not to be reactionary in my videos, but I do, you know, think we need to, you know, just not react so much to these things that happen, because what I see a lot online is that, you know, you'll be so upset with, you know, one side that, you know, you just are constantly debating with them about how they're wrong, and then they're debating with you, and then you kind of miss the whole point. The point was Sandra Bland died in police custody and never got justice. So I try not to get engaged in the back and forth. At the same time, I do think that our people, we have to learn that, you know, the first thing that someone's going to see if, you know, you get your sting by a cop is your skin, is the fact that you're Black. And I think that should take precedent over a lot of our beliefs, a lot of our ideologies, a lot of the things we might subscribe to. So, you know, it was very unfortunate that some people do feel like they don't want to associate themselves with her because of her beliefs, because of her views. But at the same time, you know, I understand that we're in this world, this really weird world with social media, where people are just constantly reacting to each other. So I think, you know, what I would rather emphasize is that we have to learn to stop reacting to different people's beliefs and instead learn to react to the actual situation. The situation is, or people are oppressed, or people are colonized, or people are enslaved, or people are all of these things. So why am I going to debate with you over your personal beliefs, over your religious beliefs, over your beliefs on sexual orientation, when we're actually facing something that could take us all out at the same time, regardless of what I believe in or what you believe in. That's what I think, you know, we should kind of take away from these things. Frank, anything to add before we close out?
No, not really, because when it comes to this whole gay and lesbian thing, sometimes I don't want to talk about it because it got me to a point where I should have gotten a job, a very good job almost. But, you know, because the two individuals that interviewed me, you know, they asked me similar question of that kind, and I didn't answer it the way they wanted. So, you know, I didn't get a job. So they like, it was, in fact, was the interview ended right there. So they look at each other faces and it was like, you know, and right there they said the interview is finished. And they was like, do you have any question for us? And I was like, am I going to get a job? And they was like, oh, we're going to get back to you. You know, we interviewing a lot of people. And guess what? It was like, they said, we will get back to you by like next week. And then I had an interview on Thursday. On Friday, they sent me an email saying that, oh, I did not qualify for the position. In fact, somebody that was more qualified than me. And I mean, but to myself, I was like, you just told me, but next week you will get back to me. And then Thursday and Friday, you getting back to me saying that somebody have filled the position already. So, you know, it's the same thing, because it was a question that came, you know, like if you work in it, because it was how do you call it? You know, yeah, myself, we did an internship in Harrisburg. So after I went back, I did my graduate program, everything, and then I got a job offer at the House of Representative, and that's how I went for the interview twice. And you know, I met these two. I don't, you know, yeah, but a guy and a woman. So they asked me this question, like, okay, so in case you work in this office and all of those things, and you meet somebody come there who is, you know, les and gay and whatsoever, what are you gonna do? And I said, I'm gonna serve the person. And then it was like, and then the person said, okay, you work in this office and you found out that this person is not straight. And, you know, I'm just trying to paraphrase the question. Yeah, this person is not straight. And so, and are you going to work with the person? Like, you know, like I said, I'm just trying to paraphrase it, but yeah, are you going to work with the person? Are you going to do, you know, so,
Who's
and
talking
I
about
said,
sex at the workplace? That's crazy.
yeah, you know, I mean, so it was funny. Like, so what I said to the person, I don't do what they do, and I will never do what they do. And, you know, although, you know, I'm not against what they do, but I don't do what they do, and I will never do what they do. And that's how I didn't get a job. You know, so sometimes when it comes to those things, I don't want to talk about it. But with Kevin Hart, you know, these celebrities, sometimes when they feel that they get money, then they want to leave their own neighborhood and then go live in a suburb, you know, in a white neighborhood or whatsoever. But in reality, you are not part of these people in the first place, because whenever you live among these people and something happened to your people, you will never be in a position to speak for your people, because you live among, you know, the people who don't speak for your people. So if you speak for your people, they're going to hate you because you live among them. They're going to come after you. So sometimes it comes to a point where some of these celebrities, it's not like they don't want to talk, but they feel that if they make a comment, they not live among their own people. They live among, you know, the people who doesn't look like them. So if they talk for their people, they're going to come after them. You see, they're going to come after them. They're going to come after their children. So sometimes they just forgo it. Like, you know what? I don't want to, you know, talk about this because I live among these people. I don't live among my people. So if I comment on this, my life going to be in jeopardy. And, you know, and sometimes to some of these people, they just try to ignore it because they want the money. And then at the end of the day, when they get in trouble, and then they want a black person to come out to speak for them. And thing doesn't work that way. Like Nelson Mandela said, you know, your enemies are not my enemies. And, you know, your enemies are my friend, because your enemy understand my struggle. So when you can understand my struggle, I will be there for you when you get in situation, you know, and you need me. I will come for you. But if you're not for me, if you don't understand my struggle and you get into situation, trust me, I'm not going to come there. I'm not going to talk for you.
All right. I did want to say a funny comment, Frank. Mr. Thug Life 404 says you got to lie on your interviews, bro. So Keep that in mind next time.
You said what?
He said you gotta lie on your interviews. So anyway, so thank you. And again, we are FAL, Federation of African Federation. I'm sorry, Kofi, you have any other thoughts?
No, I'm just saying if someone's openly able to talk about their sexual preferences on the floor, I think that's a sign of sexual harassment. Whether you're a man, whether you're a gay man, whether you're a straight woman, whether you're a gay woman, you know, that shouldn't even be discussed at the workplace. So if you're on an interview and they're bringing up these like scenarios, I feel like they're already breaking some kind of like work environment rules. So for you to be questioned on an interview, it's almost like they're like kind of forcing you to like choose a side almost, which is totally
I guess they saw the individual they were dealing with. They saw like, okay, he had an absence, so it's going to be easy to get him, but they got the wrong person.
yeah
That's
crazy.
All right, so as I said, we're the Federation of Liberation. If you want more information on our organization or want to join our organization, please look at the links down below, and we will see you all in another live stream.